Hello, welcome to the Food Business School Food Biz Plus series. I'm Will Rosenzweig, your host and Dean of the Food Business School at the Culinary Institute of America. It is a great pleasure to be with you and be joined by people from all over the world who participate with us monthly in discussions about food, entrepreneurship, innovation, and particularly topics of interest for people who are starting and growing cutting edge food companies. And this week, it's a real pleasure to have a real hero of mine and a good friend, the founder of Civil Eats, Naomi Starkman, here to join us. And Naomi will come on in just a second, I hope. And we'll spend about 45 minutes with you talking about food and media and communication. And we'll obviously, with this historic moment here with the election in the United States, which has certainly ripple effects for the entire world, we'll talk about the potential implications for food policy as it relates to health and sustainability, and perhaps brainstorm with some of you to get your ideas and suggestions. One of the ways this works, our Adobe Connect platform enables you, the live listeners, to participate actively with our chat area. And if you can send in messages to Naomi and myself, we will try our best to address them. So it's fantastic. We have people from Montana, from Australia, from Mexico, all on the line with us. Some of them are actually participating tomorrow morning. And someone just logged in and said they're online from Hungary, and it's 2 a.m. in the morning. So you win the prize for staying up the latest to join us. So Naomi, if you could come online here and show your smiling face to our participants, I'd really appreciate it. And if not, I will just improvise. There she is. Fantastic.
Hi, Will.
Hello.
Hi.
How are you today?
I've been better, but making my way through the day. It's really good to see your face.
Nice to see you too. I know this is a very difficult time and a really unexpected outcome with the presidential election. And it sends a lot of things into a state of uncertainty. I think everybody is, I think, waiting just to understand exactly how rhetoric manifests as action and directive and policy. And certainly, it's interesting. I think you and I talked about this, but food never really surfaced as a topic in any of the presidential candidates' platforms or campaign messages. But it's such a fundamental issue um, to everyone's well-being, personal and planetary. But let's come to that. You know, what I'm really interested in, Naomi, you have such a diverse set of experiences that led you to really become a social entrepreneur and launch Civil Eats just a few number of years ago. And for those of you that are watching that aren't familiar with Naomi's background, I'm going to ask her to describe her journey a little bit. But there's been many nice things written about her in Modern Farmer and other publications that have featured her work. And so I just love for our listeners to get a sense of kind of what background and interests and passions did you bring to launch your media platform venture in the food business? Just it's about 4 years now, right?
It's actually going to be 8 in January.
Oh, is that right?
Yeah.
Eight?
Yep.
Wrong. Maybe 4 years since the Kickstarter campaign.
That's right. Exactly.
Okay, sorry.
No worries. In fact, first, I just want to thank you, Will, for inviting me to speak with you and for saying such nice words about our work. And also, I just want to tell the world what a mentor you have been to me. And I'm very appreciative of your support. Um, Civil Eats started in 2009, right at the beginning of the Obama administration, and it was an outgrowth of a website that we built at the beginning of a really important public event. It was called Slow Food Nation, and the event was sort of a watershed moment for the food movement. It allowed us to really showcase some of the country's best food at the time, and what I would call the foodorati were present. So everybody from some of my amazing heroes, Wendell Berry, Wes Jackson from the Land Institute, Michael Pollan, Eric Schlosser, Alice Waters, everybody was in attendance to really talk about the issues. And we had an incredible garden in front of San Francisco City Hall. This is before the White House garden.
Oh, I
And
remember that.
yeah, it was an amazing, amazing event. And it really sort of set off in motion this idea that people wanted to have more thoughtful discourse around the ideas around sustainable agriculture. I have a background, a very circuitous path towards civil eats, but I started off as a law student who was interested in international law. I thought I would be an international lawyer. And then I ended up working in public policy for the city of San Francisco for a number of years. My first job was actually working in ethics at the city's ethics commission. And I really do believe that everything that I do today is touched by the issue of corporate control of our food system, of a lot of the large issues that we have in this country have to do with campaign finance issues. And I was early on sort of exposed to those concepts. One of the things I realized as a public policy person was that most people don't actually care, unfortunately, about public policy. And when I would talk to reporters and those in the media, I really had a sense that they were able to better translate the ideas to a much bigger audience. And they were able to mainstream the concepts. And so I just had this small thread that I started to follow. And the thread led me to New York. And I ended up living in New York for about 5 years, where I worked in mainstream media. And I was a corporate communications person for Newsweek at the time when we invaded Iraq. And you could say I really learned what media is all about. I really learned trial by fire. Our reporters were embedded there. I have never in my life been so deeply enmeshed in the media as I was at that time, and it gave me incredibly good training to go to my next job, which was working for the New Yorker magazine, and I worked there for 4 years. And I was incredibly lucky to work with some of the most talented reporters and writers and editors of our time, and really understand some of the deep issues around media. It was at a time when these two very venerable publications were struggling with their forthcoming online presence, and it was a story to be sort of shadowed later in the world of digital media. While I was at the New Yorker, I had an incredible opportunity to meet Alice Waters. Even though I grew up in the Bay Area, I had not met her before. And she was presenting a dinner with some other chefs, Dan Barber, Peter Hoffman, two chefs who have become friends and mentors. And it was at this dinner at the New Yorker Festival that I had this incredible light bulb go on, where I started to ask questions about the story behind our food. This beautiful table of food was presented to us, and I wanted to know more about it. So Alice actually really encouraged me to go into the world, and she told me about the agroecology program at UC Santa Cruz. And she told me about WWOOFing, Worldwide Opportunities in Organic Farms. And a couple months later, I went to WWOOF in Costa Rica. And I met my farming mentor, Susan Ujic from Helsing Junction Farms in Washington State. It's one of the oldest and largest organic farms. And she's a real pioneer in the organic food movement. And she met me on a boat to Nicaragua and became a friend and mentor. And she said, you know, when you get back to New York, Naomi, you got to figure out what you're going to do. You've been a lawyer, a policy person. Now you are interested in farming. So Dan Barber had just opened Stone Barns, and I became one of their first apprentices. And I would put my bike on the train at 125th Street in Harlem and take the train out to Tarrytown, where the farm is located. And I farmed there for a year while I was still working at the New Yorker. And then I quit the New Yorker and told David Remnick, the editor, I was going to become a farmer. And he said I was an idiot.
What does he know?
Yes, right. But I said, you know what? I know it may seem crazy, but these issues really matter, and one day you'll be reporting on them too, and the New Yorker does now. So that's sort of my background as
I
and
love that. Can I just for our listeners, I want to just point out that it has the same contours as Joseph Campbell's hero's journey. So, and this is very much reflective of how many entrepreneurial journeys unfold. And,
yeah,
just to point out a couple of things was, number one, you have these kind of disparate experiences, but one thing led to another. And many of them led to another through some relationship that you created that was a little bit unexpected. And that moment when you were at the dinner in New York where you met Alice Waters, I think of that as that sort of outpost because you hadn't placed yourself in that community yet fully. You were really in the media, like you said. You were at Newsweek and then you were at the New Yorker, and so you were interested in food. That was certainly your curiosity and your passion. But you arrive at this moment, and for any of you Star Wars buffs out there, you'll always recall that Luke has to go to some kind of, unusual destination, like the outpost of the bar at the edge of the universe or whatever, to find these unlikely mentors and allies. And so I just love that part of your story. And you received this sort of burst of encouragement from, a hero, an idol themselves, or
yeah,
several, who could see in you your sincerity and could see in you your passion and potential. And so, and they gave you a bit of a lift or I call it the helping hand. It appears. And so I love that about that. And then you realize that in order to be credible and effective in this new area of curiosity, you had to have deep experience. You had to get down in the ground, get your hands dirty, literally. I had a sort of a little bit of a similar experience when I was starting Republic of Tea because I was so fascinated with, the tea and the tea ceremony. And my colleagues and I got, my co founders and I got very carried away with the imaginative, creative part of maybe conveying tea. But I got hung up and I didn't really know it at the time. It took me months and months. I got stuck and I realized that I didn't know enough about tea. Like I didn't really know where great tea came from or how to get it. And so I just love that part of your story that you went to work on these farms and you really got a firsthand experience. And now kind of accumulating, integrating, aggregating all of these different experiences to be a media entrepreneur in a time of great disruption in the media and sort of profound challenges and concerns. I mean, I just read, I've been reading, actually, I should say, after this election, and this is one of the antidotes that I want to propose throughout our talk, is that I've actually tried to the first kind of impulse I had was to cancel my subscription to the New York Times. I hate to say that, but I feel like I was almost abused during this last few months by so many people speculating and promoting points of view. So, as these media platforms that we've grown up with have become so desperate for a sustainable business model for eyeballs in the age of Facebook, I think that we're losing the heart of credible, independent, media. And so, for Civil Eats to wade into this moment in time, it seems to me is more important than ever to have an independent. Basically, you have a user-supported
mm,
platform. And,
right.
talk to us about that because I know in the last year you've really been searching for the answers here of how to make this sustainable and scalable and continue with integrity.
Yeah. Well, thank you for the Star Wars analogy. I'd never heard that before, so I'm going to take that into the whole story. I mean, I just want to tell people that when I was growing up, there was really no sustainable agricultural studies as there is today. We reported on this as well. There's numerous studies across the United States now. So I kind of did have to make it up, and I did have to follow a lot of threads, and I had a lot of support. Although I think anybody will attest when you're trying to do something entirely new, a lot of people have a lot of questions about what you're doing, and it takes an inordinate amount of courage to trust yourself and also to carve a new path.
And
Sometimes,
perseverance.
and perseverance. And I think one of the things, Will, you said to me too, is that, you know, sometimes good ideas come too soon. You know, there's always times for ideas, and sometimes some of the best ideas, you know, people are not ready for them or they're before their time. So for a long time, I kept thinking that maybe we were before our time. You know, when we started in 2009, for 4 years, we essentially were unfunded. Everybody worked for free. We had an incredible group of reporters who donated their time. Both of my co-founder, Paul Lacrossfield, and I worked for free the entire time. I actually have never been paid. So a lot of people don't know that I still am an unpaid founder of this website. In 2013, we did a Kickstarter and we raised an unprecedented $100,000, which was really remarkable for any news organization of any beat, and really showed us that we had an incredible amount of community to support us in our ideas and issues. And we hired our current managing editor, Twilight Greenaway, who's a fantastic editor and has really helped us raise the bar on our reporting. So since 2013, she's worked with us, 2014, and we started a subscription service in 2015, so more like a community-based support of our site. We've never taken advertising. We are individually supported by donors, by foundations. We are a nonprofit for all intents and purposes. And it's incredibly challenging to create a business model when there is none. So as you alluded to, I was lucky enough to have been awarded a fellowship last year at Stanford, the John S. Knight Fellowships, where they select 20 people from around the world, 12 journalists from America, and 8 folks from overseas to really look at some of these hard questions of our time. And I use Civil Eats as a model of how do you create a revenue stream for a business idea. I mean, if you look at any entrepreneur, Twitter or Facebook or many others, they're great ideas that often get started without a business model and without a revenue stream. And that's what we've been trying. And so one of the things I've done to innovate in that space is to have pretty high profile media partners such as Time and The Atlantic. This year we partnered with Food and Wine for the first time, and we have a really unique paid syndication model with them, which is very rare in the media world. We actually get paid for our content that we deliver to them. So there are a number of different ways to support media. Nobody's figured it out, from the New York Times to the Washington Post. And as you said, you felt kind of whiplashed by your experience in this recent election. We live in a time of clickbait and gotcha journalism, and it's very, very challenging. When we first started, people were not reporting on the issues that we're reporting on, and now almost every single outlet has a food vertical. And some are doing worthwhile food policy reporting, but oftentimes they miss the systems perspective. And some of the bigger questions, we really take our time. We write one story a day. We try to ask very nuanced questions, and we don't have the answers often. And I think that's unusual for a lot of reporting. We try to really create dialogue and discourse.
Well, we've had a number of experts on this program who know a lot about millennial interests. Sophie Egan and Eve Turow, Paul, who I know you are friends with. And, you know, they've emphasized really this connection that this generation feels between their own identity and the food they eat, and a greater curiosity than ever before in where that food comes from, and even the social dimensions and political dimensions of how that food might be treated. I was at the Rethink Food conference this week and was with Laurie Demerit from the Hartman Group, and she said that, you know, animal welfare is skyrocketing in terms of a concern among, you know, consumers and food. And I think that Civil Eats becomes this really important trusted source. And I love that you are finding a way to, you know, in effect syndicate or distribute some of the content. I think that that may be the way of the future because the mainstream media companies are cutting back so much that they can't really field the kind of depth or expertise necessary to cover these these topic verticals. But what's so profound about food, and this is where I hope we can take this over the next period of time, is for people to deeply understand how food and the food system that brings that food to us is linked to our health and well-being and really climate change. We know now that industrial agriculture contributes 45% of all climate impacts, that there's massive impacts on air quality, water usage, water quality, soil health and fertility. What's interesting is this is all becoming it more visible, like you said. I mean, nobody was reporting on it. I think people are actually reaching a moment, at least some people, of a sense of their interdependence with food. And so I guess in turning to a more optimistic and maybe pathologically optimistic outlook, I'm wondering if now that, we're many of us really have been, like you said, whiplash. We're jolted. We're jolted awake. And you and I were talking earlier about that map that showed 18 to 25-year-olds almost universally, I think it was over 95% supporting the Democratic candidate. But on the flip side of that, there was a pretty low turnout of those people to the polls. So it's interesting to me because that's telling me, well, there's a group of people that are waking up, but the level of engagement and sense of responsibility is low. So let's talk about personal responsibility as citizens, because one of the things I really would love to accomplish in my lifetime is shift our mental model of us as consumers to being citizens. And I think with food, this is first and foremost. So these big food companies, they all think of us as consumers. But if we think of ourselves as citizens and actively participating in a food system and actually expressing our values and our preferences by intentionally and mindfully buying and eating products, there could be a gigantic transformation of the food system and the policy surrounding it for the better.
Yeah, well, there's a lot packed in what you just said.
I know.
But I'll
pull out a
pull
few
out a
things
few.
that interest
Yeah.
you.
So, well, first, I just want to say that I think millennials are oftentimes unfairly grouped together, but by and large, as a general segment of society, probably one of the more studied group of our time. Our core audience are actually self-identify as food-focused or food-conscious millennials. And I have a lot of respect and admiration, actually, for millennials. I know they get a bad rap for other supposed traits, but I actually think that they are part of the reason why the food companies have moved their products to where they are. I think millennials grew up at a time when they could scan something, or they could take a photo of something, or they could tweet at somebody. So the power of social media for this generation has created an on-site instant demand for more truth and hopefully more trust and transparency in the food system. And this demand has been radical in the response from the food industry. And I'm sure many of your guests have spoken about this, and you and I have spoken about this many times, and the people watching today and perhaps later know this as well, but it bears repeating that this has been a seismic change. We've seen never before the largest multinational, international conglomerates changing, reformulating their food products to help make a better market share for themselves and hopefully at the same time meet millennials' changing food interests. So healthy, natural, animal welfare, GMO-free, gluten-free, all of those things have been remarkably important. And the bottom line has been the furthest, it has been in the most in people's minds and in the industry's mind, at least in terms of changing food products. And I think you're seeing food, and I know that Eve talks about this and has written about this in her book, which I really recommend that everybody read. It's a short book. It's incredibly important to understand why this generation, and I believe she calls them yummers, why they really do identify with food, and that for them, food is their defining movement, as it was for perhaps my generation around the environment, that food is the spear of the environmental movement. And this is a generation that has an inordinate amount of anxiety and stress. They're growing up at a time with incredible environmental and economic anxiety. And for them, food is a solace, it's a comfort, it's a control, and it's an identifying factor. So that's one piece of this puzzle is millennials, and had millennials only voted in this election, Clinton would have won. Interestingly, a lot of the millennials who didn't vote last time, there was a split party in 2000, didn't experience what it was like to vote for a third party, and so maybe they voted. There was a record amount of millennials who voted for third party candidates in this election, so they didn't know the ramifications. I'm not debating the merits of whether we should have a third party system. That requires a whole other webinar. But I think they just didn't have the experience of what that meant for this election. The other
That's
thing
a
I wanted
profound,
to, yeah,
let me just jump in. I mean, that's really a
yeah,
profound insight because I think we're coming into an era where many people don't have experiences with the foreboding risks that come with, increased surveillance, more authoritarian rhetoric, things we've seen. And I'm sort of interested, maybe just you mentioned, corporations changing products, but we're also seeing like the concentration of power, in the food system, and it's not always transparent. And it was interesting to see that story today about how the Grocery Manufacturers Association was slapped with an $18 million fine for improper lobbying. And you might explain to our viewers sort of the Grocery Manufacturers Association is made up of all these brands that want to tell you good things about them, but then they often subsidize and support activities that are completely counter to their brand values or what they're telling the public. And so
or what their
one of the
customers
things I'm
expect of
hoping
us.
that we can do through Food Business School in this webinar is increase food systems intelligence, and skepticism, and um, help people develop the tools to look beyond the label, if you will, to look beyond the story to get at the truth and facts. So maybe you talk a little bit about that and how Civil Eats potentially is a resource for people in that respect.
Well, I think one of the number one questions we get asked probably is, what should I eat? I mean, food is incredibly personal. It's very political as well, but it's one of the most challenged issues of our time. And again, back to the media equation, we see multiple headlines of people constantly asking questions like, what is cage free? What is pasture raised? What should I be eating? I don't understand the difference. What is humanely raised? So, for example, let's just take a very narrow issue. Many people have what's called label fatigue. So I really do believe that labels are one of the defining factors of the food movement right now. And we've seen that with this incredible war around the GMO label. And the Grocery Manufacturers Association was fined for improper lobbying around the GMO label and a ballot measure that was trying to allow for people in the state of Washington to have a GMO label or a label on food products that included genetically engineered ingredients. So there is a war in the aisles, in the actual shopping aisles, and at the corporate headquarters, and on Capitol Hill around labeling. I mean, to the point that we did come to a national or federal agreement, rather, on GMO labeling, much to the chagrin of advocates, because what was agreed to was QR code that could be scanned, and most people feel like that's not appropriate. Most people don't even know what a QR code is. They don't have a cell phone that could scan for that information. So it felt very disingenuous to many food advocates who were really asking for a label on food that would say whether the ingredients included genetically modified food or not. One interesting factor is that there's been such an outcry around labels like natural or healthy that the U.S. Food and Drug Administration is now currently actually considering issuing guidance on those two terms, which to me just seems like a whole can of worms. But we're seeing things like grass-fed currently under consideration, and things like free. And these are all largely a result of consumer for more information. And there's a battle going on between the businesses that are trying to get the halo effect, or some might call it greenwashing, of these better products or better for you or for the planet products, and then this huge consumer demand. And so to your question of where civil eats fits in all of that, we really try to get into the muck on this. I mean, this is some pretty wonky stuff, and you're a busy person. You don't have a lot of time at the end of the day when you're standing in the shopping aisle at the grocery store. You just want to know, what do I buy? Do I buy cage-free USD organic eggs? Do I buy natural eggs? Do I buy GMO verified project eggs? So we try to help our readers understand the larger implications, and that's really our secret sauce. We try to do very thoughtful reporting to take you there to understand why it should matter to you, the average person. And our goal is to take those stories and bring them to a much wider audience.
So if I want to go beyond that, and you're helping me decide what to eat, how do I think about participating more actively in this war, if you will? How can I impact outcomes? How can I influence and inform other people? I mean, what advice do you have if I wanted to eat with intention in a way to promote health of me and my friends and loved ones, and I wanted to say mitigate, climate impacts from industrial agriculture or livestock farming? What recommendation? I mean, what are some practical things I could do, both in terms of what I eat, but also how I participate as a citizen in the food movement?
Well, the number one thing you can do is vote with your fork. If we're lucky enough, we get a chance 3 times a day to eat. And if you're able to afford organic, I would say that's the number one thing, to support sustainable agriculture and agroecological practices. Ask your farmers, support farmers directly, go to the farm directly if you can, either by purchasing a subscription to a community-supported agriculture box or going to the farmer's market. I mean, understand where your food comes from, understand what it takes to grow your food, understand the implications of non-organic food, a food that is practiced in an industrial way that might harm the planet and the people. And I think starting there is a very simple thing. If the number one question is often like, just tell me what to eat, right? So if the question is what should I eat, then it's pretty simple to me. Eat organic and/or low on the food chain. Michael Pollan's, eat food, mostly plants, not very much. I think I just butchered that. Sorry, Michael. But something to that extent. And really,
Eat food, not too much, mostly plants.
there you go. I would say really also eating low on the food chain is hugely important for climate, and
So
being real, yeah.
yeah, so all of this, it's systemic. It's so interesting by making these choices, which may be learning new habits and discovering new recipes of how to cook, and maybe discovering restaurants that have different priorities. But it's all possible now. It's all within reach for many people to do this. One of our guests, Kevin Brown, was talking about, he's been really fascinated with food waste, and some of his research came back and said that on average, people like a household will waste $1,400 worth of food per year,
Mhm.
and that just comes from sort of improper planning. Sometimes, date codes that you and I have discussed that aren't necessarily appropriate, to the products, or misleading because people are kind of ill-informed. When I think of that $1,400, I'm just thinking, wow, somebody could just take $100 of that and give it to Civil Eats. Wouldn't that be an amazing, you know,
Well, or one of the
diversion of resources?
yeah, I mean, I was going to say that just to your previous point, not everybody can afford or has
Right.
access to organic food. And it's
That's
actually
right.
one of the biggest issues of our time, and it's actually a huge and important issue that we've reported on since our inception, which is equity and access to good food. I mean, I truly do believe that access to good food is a human right. It should not be a privilege. So one of the things we try to dive into and really look at is the very basic underpinnings, and we're talking about structural racism and environmental racism that keep
Mm.
people disproportionately impacted by the food system away from healthy foods. And
Mhm.
understanding what are the community appropriate solutions to things like food deserts where there's just a lack of fresh food and there are no fresh food alternatives, let alone organic. Um, it's been the elephant in the room in the food movement. I actually think it's been mirrored in this election. The reason that we've been so disconnected is because we want to believe that we're colorblind, and in fact, we have been unwilling to embrace and have real inclusive discussion and discourse with people and having leaders of color at the table. And to the extent that I have any ability to further that conversation, we have really sought out voices of color, stories of communities of color where they're making great strides. And I feel like it's central to this conversation around transparency and access to food.
Very well said. It reminds me of a little bit of the work that Michelle Michon has been doing with Wholesome Wave and innovating in terms of getting the SNAP program, which formerly known as food stamps, accepted at farmers market, expanding the access to fresh fruits and vegetables and embedding kind of an incentive. Are there other sightings or signals on your radar where entrepreneurial solutions are addressing those issues of access and equity that
Yeah,
that inspire
yeah,
you?
yeah. I mean, there's programs in California, so also, so I just want to give a big shout out to Wholesome Wave because I think they're one of the most exceptional organizations in the United States that has tried to match food stamps benefits dollars for dollar. But California already has a pretty big matching program called Market Match, and it's run by the Berkeley-based Ecology Center. So there's some initiatives also in California that would help change the way that states get money for matching. Um, and we reported on that as well. And we're looking at different examples going around the country. I think really one of the most important things to note in any of these examples is really how important the public-private partnerships are. So it can't just be Wholesome Wave on its own or the Ecology Center on its own. It really needs to be USDA, which has been a good partner to many of these organizations, and really call into question whether any of these partnerships will survive a Trump presidency, whether food stamps and for women and children will survive a Trump presidency. Um, a lot of concern from food advocates about whether any of these innovative programs will be available in the future.
Mm. So again, just to think with an entrepreneur's heart and mind, what can we do? I mean, how do we become proactive um, advocates in this fight to continue the progress? And I'm a little bit optimistic because I think that people have been shaken, and I'm hopeful that maybe people are waking up. And I think once people can focus and maybe not be complacent or take things for granted. That there's more desire for action. A lot of the people, young people and learners that I've just spoken to in the last 24 hours are feeling, both fearful and anxious, but also energized in a kind of interesting, creative way. And so I'm hoping that, you and I and our other FBS faculty can, serve as sources of encouragement for the people that really want to apply themselves now, in the food system and make positive change that benefits everyone.
It would be an amazing day if, venture capitalists in Silicon Valley cared as much about apps for food delivery as they did for food access. And one of the big challenges is to make food, which is such a hot commodity right now in technology, um, as sexy as it is for Soylent or any of the kind of newfangled food products. So I know when I came to speak at your business school class, I was really inspired by the business students at Haas at UC Berkeley because they all had in mind mission focus. So not just a business for the sake of business, but really trying to find mission focus around access and equity. But I think the equal partners are the firms that are investing in food right now. And what are the ways to actually build and scale sustainable food systems? I've talked about this and written about this, but it's really very simple. It's the nuts and bolts. It's the basic infrastructure. It's scaling distribution, transportation, refrigeration, places to help small scale farmers bring their food to market and get it to more people. Connecting eaters with farmers is the number one thing I think investors could do and new businesses could do. I mean, if there's some whiz kid out there who could create the online food hub of the future, I'm telling you, it could make a huge difference in the food world.
So, are there opportunities for people in our network here in our community to help Civil Eats? Are you looking for any kinds of talent or volunteers or interns, or this is your, you know, entrepreneurial opportunity to ask for help?
Well, I appreciate that. I mean, if you're in the San Francisco Bay Area, at the end of this month, we have a fundraiser. It's our first in-person benefit. You can find out more information on our website. It's taking place in San Francisco on Tuesday, November 29th. So if you are able to attend that, that would be wonderful. Buy a subscription to Civil Eats. Buy your friends a subscription to Civil Eats for the holidays. And send us your ideas and your tips. Send us your thoughts about what you think needs to be covered. Share our stories on social media and tell more people about what we're doing and engage in a dialogue with us. We really welcome feedback.
Well, fantastic. Thanks for your time today. I know it's been a rough couple of nights here, getting settled, and I hope that you'll continue. I know you'll continue to persevere and inspire, and lead the way with really trustworthy news, information, and guidance for all of us. So thank you for your good work, and thank you for your support of our learning community.
Thank you, Will. And I just want to tell everybody who's listening that this change is up to us. So, as disheartened and frustrated as we might be, now is not the time to give up. Now is the time to organize and to move forward. And I'm all ears and ready to do it. I really hope that you'll join us in making sure that all of the gains that we've made over the last 8 years are protected and furthered for all of us. It's very important.
Thank you.
Thanks, Will.
Well, I'm going to wrap up and just let our learners know real quick about our next couple of FoodBiz Plus programs on the calendar. Kristen Richmond, a dear friend and co-founder of Revolution Foods, the country's largest healthy school meal company, and now with a budding consumer packaged goods line of healthy foods for for Kids and Families is going to be joining me on the next one. And then Steve Case, who was the legendary CEO of AOL back in the day, and really an advocate for entrepreneurs on a national level, and the author of a book called The Third Wave. Steve is a man from the world of technology who has, taken a real interest in building long-term long-term value food companies. So it's going to be really fun to have his participation with us as well. So keep your eyes peeled to our website for the specifics and registration. And we're grateful for your commitment to change the world through food. And for all of you that are still up in the middle of the night, you in Hungary, you can go to bed now. And for those of you in Australia, have a great day. Take care. Bye bye.